All right, welcome in, everybody. Today, we're diving deep, right into the heart of Psalm 46:10.
Mm.
Be still and know that I am God.
Hmm.
I mean, you know this verse, right? It's like the go-to for sermons on peace, on trusting God, all that.
Oh, absolutely. It's a classic. But that's kind of why we're here, right? We're going deeper.
Deeper, yeah. Our listeners, they're pastors, Bible study leaders. They've heard the usual interpretations. We got to give them something more to chew on.
Exactly, exactly. So we've been digging into sermons, from all sorts of churches, looking for the unique approaches, the stuff that makes you go, wait, I never thought about it like that.
The aha moments, that's what we're after.
For sure. One thing that really stood out to me was, well, you know how a lot of sermons focus on that individual piece, right? Like, me and God, we're chill.
Yeah, the personal quiet time vibe.
That's it. But a lot of these sermons connected it to God's power on a much bigger scale.
Ooh, I like where this is going. Give me an example. How do they do that?
Well, one pastor talked about this God margin.
God, Marge.
Yeah, and it's not just like, having quiet time in your day. It's the space between our best efforts and what God actually wants to do.
So, like, we do what we can, but then we got to leave room for God
At
too.
work, yeah, in ways we couldn't have planned.
Okay, I see how that's different.
Yeah.
It's not passivity. It's like recognizing our limits so God's power can take over.
Exactly. And this pastor, they had a cool idea to make it practical, for teaching.
Like a tangible thing. What was it?
They suggested, like, have people literally list out the things they're trying to control instead of trusting God with.
Okay, I get it. So it's almost like, here's my to-do list, God, but this part's all you because I got nothing.
Aha, that's a great way to put it.
Makes it real, less abstract. But okay, what other unique takes did you come across?
Well, you always get a ton of surrender analogies with Psalm 46:10, right?
Yeah, giving it all to God, that kind of thing.
Right. But this one sermon, it compared surrendering to handing God the key to your entire house, not just letting him peek into a few rooms.
Ooh, okay, I like the imagery, but is it too simplistic, you think? Like, just give God the key and poof, everything's fixed.
See, that's where the pastor got clever. They then talked about how, we often give God the key to the living room where everything's all nice and tidy,
Yeah.
but we keep the messy closets locked up tight. What are we hiding from God?
Oh, wow, that adds some layers. It forces people to think about what they're still holding back.
Exactly. And that's what good sermons do, right? They make you think. Now, getting away from analogies, some pastors, they went all out with illustrations.
Ooh, story time.
Hmm.
You know I love a good story. What kind of stuff did they pull out?
Well, this one got people talking.
No.
It was about a guy goes river rafting.
River rafting, okay.
Yeah, but not the chill kind. This is whitewater, rapids, the whole deal. And the pastor compared it to being drunk in the spirit.
Whoa, okay, that's
Ah.
a strong image.
Yeah.
Did they, like, connect the dots, though?
Hmm.
Because drunk and spirit together? You got to
Yeah.
be careful with that.
Oh, yeah, this pastor addressed that right away. The point wasn't about literally being drunk. It was about the reckless abandon, the letting go that you need when you're surrendering to God.
Oh, so, like, you're on that raft, no turning back.
Yeah.
You're trusting the current, even if it's scary.
Yeah, that's the leap of faith. You're not in control anymore, God is.
Powerful stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe works better for a younger crowd, though,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure my older folks would connect with the whole thrill-seeking aspect.
That's fair. Different strokes for different folks.
Right. Definitely.
Yeah,
You got to know your audience.
for sure. But the thing about the unpredictability of God, that came up a lot. Oh, this other one kind of threw me at first. Compared misconceptions about God to a guy in an arranged marriage.
No, that's just wild. How'd they even make that work?
It wasn't so much about the marriage itself, more like the surprise. The guy thinks it's going to be awful, but then he meets his bride and it's amazing.
Okay.
The point was, we come to God with all these ideas, right? But he can totally blow them out of the water if we let him.
Okay, now I see it. It's about letting go of our limited understanding and being open to how God actually works.
Exactly. Which can be way better than anything we could imagine.
I feel like with that one, though, you got to be careful how you unpack it, It could easily go sideways.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Nuance is key.
All right, so we've got God margin, we've got keys, we've got whitewater rafting. What else do you got?
Well, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk theology. We found some really fascinating takes on how stillness connects to God's attributes.
All right, time to get a little deeper. What did they pull out that wasn't, basic Sunday school stuff?
Well, one sermon, it tied Psalm 46:10 directly to God's omnipresence and omniscience.
Okay.
So it wasn't just about calming down. It was about the fact that because God is everywhere and knows everything, we don't need to be frantic.
That's a good point. It's not like we're ignoring the problems. It's trusting that he's already got it handled.
Exactly. Even if we can't see it yet.
But how do you preach that without it sounding like just sit back and let God do it all? Because we still got to do our part.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Human responsibility is still there. And this is where the sermons got really interesting. They started talking about ceasing, striving, not just as a command, but as an act of worship.
Hold on. Explain that one. How is not doing something an act of worship?
It's all about the heart, right? Like, if I'm constantly striving, it shows I don't really believe God's in control.
Mm.
But when I cease striving, I'm saying, God, I trust your strength, not mine. That's the worship.
Okay. Yeah, I see that. It reframes the whole being still thing, not as being lazy, but as an active choice to have faith.
That's it.
I bet that resonates with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Especially folks who feel like they always got to be doing something for God.
And that actually connects to another thing we saw. It's amazing, isn't it, how Psalm 46:10, it can speak to so many different situations. We saw sermons connecting it to, like, personal anxiety, global crises, you name it.
It's true. It's like this verse. It just has this power to meet people right where they're at, no matter what they're going through. But how these pastors, how they actually bridge that gap,
Yeah.
make those connections for their congregations.
Well, there was this one pastor used this powerful analogy of a city under siege. So imagine, right? You're trapped inside the city, surrounded by enemies, feeling completely helpless.
Okay, yeah, I can see where this is going.
Yeah.
It's starting to feel a little bit like our world right now,
Yeah.
with all the uncertainty and the division.
That's exactly what this pastor was getting at. They reminded everyone, that Psalm 46, it was written during a time of crazy turmoil for the Israelites. They were dealing with enemies and fears, that sense of helplessness, just like we feel sometimes.
So the city under siege, it becomes this metaphor for our own struggles, like both individually and as a society.
Exactly. And then, right in the middle of all that chaos, God says, "Be still and know that I am God." It's such a powerful call to trust in his protection, even when everything around us feels like it's falling apart.
That image, it really drives home the point that this verse, it's not just some nice sounding phrase, right? It's like a battle cry almost for people of faith to stand strong, even when the world feels like it's crumbling around us.
Right. And that kind of leads to another interesting approach we saw. One pastor talked about the importance of slowing down and noticing the small things in life.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
How do they connect that back to Psalm 46:10? It seems a little, I don't know, different from the whole city under siege thing.
Well, they were saying that our world today, it's so fast-paced, right? So distracting. We miss out on the beauty and the wonder that's right in front of us, constantly bombarded with information. We rarely take the time to just be still and observe.
Yeah, I get that. It's like we're always plugged in, scrolling through our phones, checking emails. We miss those quiet moments where we can connect with God.
Exactly. And this pastor, they suggested that all this busyness, it actually blocks us from experiencing God's presence in our lives.
So by slowing down, by really paying attention, we're creating space to see God working, even in the everyday moments.
You got it. It's about, like, cultivating mindfulness, right?
Yeah.
Appreciating the small things, because
Yeah.
that's often where we encounter God most clearly. A quiet sunrise, the laughter of a child.
I like that. It's a reminder that stillness, it's not just about sitting in silence. It's about shifting our perspective, being present in the moment. And you know what? That actually connects back to the idea of ceasing striving as an act of worship. We were talking about that earlier.
Oh, great point. It all ties together, doesn't it? Surrendering our need to control everything, trusting that God's working, even in those little moments.
Absolutely. So, okay, we've been talking big picture stuff, but I'm always curious about practical applications. Did any of these sermons offer, like, concrete ideas for bringing Psalm 46:10 to life for people?
Oh, for sure. Several of them did. One pastor, they emphasized using visual elements, like showing pictures of nature,
Yeah.
a calm sea, a mountain range, to evoke that feeling of stillness and peace.
Oh, I love that. Visuals can be so powerful, especially today when we're all so bombarded with images all the time. It's like it taps into a different part of the brain, It makes the message more impactful.
Totally. Another pastor suggested having small group discussions where people could share their personal experiences with stillness, how it's affected their faith, the challenges they've faced, the breakthroughs.
Yeah, I like that. It's great for building community, creating a space where people can be real with each other.
Right. It helps people realize they're not alone in their struggles. And then this other pastor, they gave this simple but powerful challenge to incorporate just a few minutes of silence into your daily routine.
Okay, I can get behind that. 5 minutes, everybody can spare 5 minutes.
Exactly. It's not about having hours of free time. It's about making stillness a habit, a regular part of your life.
A way of life, yeah. Wow, we've covered a lot of ground. But I feel like there's still so much more to unpack with Psalm 46:10. Back again. Man, I'm still thinking about all these different ways to approach Psalm 46:10. It's crazy how much there is to unpack in just one little verse.
You know what's really wild? How relevant it still is, like centuries later. I mean, that whole be still and know that I am God, it speaks right to all the anxiety we're facing today, don't you think?
Totally. It's like this perfect antidote to all the noise and chaos of the world. You know, one thing that struck me as we were going through these sermons is how many pastors really emphasize personal experience.
Oh, yeah. They talked about how, like, it's not enough to just know the verse, right?
Yeah.
It's about actually experiencing that stillness, that deep knowing of God for yourself.
It's got to be more than just head knowledge, right?
Yeah.
It's got to go deeper to the heart. But I'm curious, how do they teach that? Do they just tell people, go be still and see what happens?
Well, no, not exactly. A lot of them actually shared their own stories, about how experiencing stillness had transformed their faith, their understanding of God.
See, that's something I struggle with sometimes. As a pastor, you want to teach these things, but you don't want to come across like you've got it all figured out,
Yeah.
But when you share personal stories, it makes it real. People can relate to that.
Totally. It makes you realize that everyone, even pastors, struggle with this stuff sometimes. Nobody's perfect at it.
Right. Which actually brings us to another big takeaway from this whole deep dive, the importance of being vulnerable.
Vulnerability, yeah. So many pastors talked about how crucial it is to create a safe space for people to share their struggles with stillness, to admit their doubts, their fears. It's not always easy.
Yeah, it's hard to cultivate stillness when you feel like you have to pretend you've got it all together.
Right. But when you create that environment where people feel safe being honest, that's where real growth can happen.
It normalizes the struggle,
Mhm.
helps people realize they're not alone in it.
Exactly. And it allows people to support each other, to encourage each other on their journey.
Man, this deep dive has been so insightful. I feel like I've got a whole new perspective on Psalm 46:10 and a ton of ideas to share with my congregation.
That's fantastic to hear. And as you go and prepare your next sermon or study, we want to leave you with one final question to think about.
Okay, hit me with it. What's the question?
How can you help your community move beyond just being still and actually engage with the truth that God is God?
Wow, that's a powerful question. It's not just about finding a moment of peace. It's about letting that truth sink in deep,
Yeah.
letting it shape our actions, our relationships, everything.
Exactly. Recognizing God's power even in the midst of chaos. Trusting his plan, even when we don't understand it. That's what it's all about.
This deep dive has really been a gift. I feel energized, ready to share this message with my congregation.
We're so glad to hear that. Remember, the message of Psalm 46:10, it's timeless, it's powerful. Be still and know that I am God.
So to all you pastors and Bible study leaders out there, embrace that challenge. Seek out those moments of stillness. Let God work in your heart, and then share those experiences with others. We'll see you in the next deep dive.